First of all, a warm welcome to all of you. It's, I think, an exciting moment now to be discussing the OGC API features within the context of Inspire. Before we get started with the details, a few comments about the rules of the workshop today. I would kindly ask all participants who are not speaking to mute their microphones and to only unmute them when speaking. Same applies for the video. We are quite a few people today, so I would kindly ask all of you to not be using the video when not speaking. If you want to be discussing certain topics, you can please raise your hand, and also I would encourage you to extensively be using the chat functionality that is offered by WebEx. The audio option, so we will be able also to speak. We have foreseen towards the end of the workshop a questions and answers session. That said, allow me to very quickly share with you a little bit of information about who we are today. We have, I'm particularly delighted to share the values with you. We have 185 registered attendees. Those numbers are growing because there are quite a few very late registrations. And in terms of profile, what I saw from the registration is that there are a lot of public sector representatives, a lot of software vendors, both proprietary and open source, and last but not least, a lot of students and representatives of academia. Warm welcome to the students. It's good to have you all among us. In terms of geographical distributions, of course, quite a lot of representatives of member states, but today the audience is a lot broader. We have also a lot of registrations from neighboring countries and European neighborhood policy and candidate countries to the European Union, but also countries like the USA, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, Canada, etc. Now, going to the workshop structure, what we're going to discuss today, it is separated into four distinct blocks. So first of all, we are going to define the context, discussing in particular the topic of why do we need and do we need APIs in Inspire. Then we're going to be looking into the specifications. First of all, starting with a brief overview of the OGC API Features standard, and then looking more into the specificity of how it can become an Inspire download service. To keep it real, we will have another section, which is focusing on I hear some background noise. May I kindly ask you to mute your microphones, please? Seems to be better now. Thanks for muting.
Está aqui
Well,
com o microfone.
really, just give me 1 second. I will mute all the participants again, and then we continue. Sorry about that. And then, in order to keep it real, as mentioned, we will focus on different deployments of the OGC API features, which are very interesting. They are in different application domains from different countries, and they're using also very different technologies, and there are different architectural styles and architectural decisions that were made for deploying the actual standards. Then we finalized the workshop with a short discussion and some information on the next steps. So that's it for today. Diving directly into the details about the context. The first question that we need to ask ourselves is why actually do we need APIs in Inspire? And in order to answer that question, there are several different perspectives that we can adopt in order to answer that question. The first one is the political perspective, but also we can answer that question from an organizational perspective as well as a technological perspective. The political perspective. I think the time is more than appropriate now to be adopting and investigating the OGC API.
Sorry to interrupt, but it is very difficult to listen to your voice because there are still several microphones unmuted.
Yes.
Could you get that in order, please?
I'm doing that several times already in
All
videos
right.
a bit, but let me do that once again. I will now for
Okay.
just 1 second stop sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And then I will mute all participants. I think it is better now. Okay. So, from a political perspective, it is appropriate to be thinking of the OGC API features and of APIs in general for several reasons. First of all, we have...
Alex, you are not sharing your screen now.
Can you see it now? Can you see my screen now?
No,
No.
we can't.
No, Alex.
Oh, that's interesting. Let me see now. I will share again.
Now, yes.
And let me swap the presenter view now. Now I think it should be okay now.
That's fine.
Excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Vlado, for confirming. So, from a political perspective, we have several highly relevant developments on the European level. First of all, starting from the European Strategy for Data, which was introduced in February 2020, which basically defines an agile approach for the establishment of a European single market for data. And it by creating the right conditions for the reuse of different kinds of data, ranging from public, but also private and citizen data. This is expected to be done through the establishment of thematic data spaces in different domains. And you can imagine that if we want to have a pan-European market for data, it is essential that we have simple, straightforward, and efficient means for accessing information. Otherwise, it is not going to work. So from that point of view, standard-based APIs are fundamental. Then we have the Open Data Directive, which defines 6 thematic categories of the so-called high-value data sets. Those are data sets that have to be, can have a substantial societal and economic impact. And the idea for those high-value data sets in the 6 categories is that they should be made available through APIs to the benefit of the European society and economy. Then we have quite a lot of development in the research realm. with I think it's the biggest research program in the world, the Horizon Europe program, which defines principles that require that the data that the research projects are creating is made available, is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So there, again, a standard-based API can play a very important role. Last but not least, we know that we are now in the end of 2020. The first implementation cycle of the Inspire directive concludes. And then this is an excellent opportunity for thinking about updating and modernizing the way in which Inspire works in order to make sure that it remains fit for purpose and that it provides a substantial contribution within the data spaces that were already mentioned. Then from an organizational perspective, web APIs, I think you would agree with me, act as a glue, kind of a glue between different stakeholders, but also between different structures within the same organization. And in a way, they create, through web APIs, we can create a common ground for collaboration and for exchange of information between public and private actors. APIs can help us modernize legacy systems. We will see interesting examples in the deployments part of our workshop, where existing systems are proxied through a layer that implements APIs. APIs are also very important for public sector data delivery, and in a way they help us go in the direction of really adding value to the organizations, so going beyond really only the obligation to comply to a certain piece of legislation, but really by deploying APIs we add value. Of course, we need to do that by following standards and not be inventing everything ourselves. Finally, yet importantly, from a technological perspective, there are many reasons why we should be investigating web APIs. First of all, we see them as a means for mainstreaming the way in which data is shared in spatial data infrastructures. I think now it is more than clear that developers would expect an API in order to interact with the data. And then they can also, APIs can also help us improve the discoverability and in general simplify the whole process of sharing information. There is very good client support, considering also the fact that the browser becomes a client, and then using HTTP requests, it is very easy and straightforward to acquire the data. And then thinking more in the direction of standardization, I think this the use of APIs creates an opportunity for us to tap into the really modernized way in which standardization bodies and the OGC in particular are developing the new standards through the more agile way of doing, through the more extensive use of collaboration tools, and through the very quick development of different client and server implementation. So I think with this very brief introduction, I have managed to convince you that the context is more than favorable for what we're going to hear. And within that context, we in Inspire have established a working group for investigating the OGC API features as an Inspire download service. Very few words about the group. it's a short-term. It has a short-term mandate. Our idea is to complete the work of the group by the end of 2020. We're having regular monthly meetings, and we have in the group representatives of 15 member states. We have both data providers, but also solution software and solution providers within that group. What's in the scope of our activities is to prepare and submit for approval to the Inspire Maintenance and Implementation Group. So this is, for those who don't know, the governance body of Inspire, a good practice that is dedicated to the OGC API features as Inspire download service. What we will be dealing with separately are the executable tests and development of an executable test suite for OGC API feature instances. We're going to discuss that topic a little bit later in the agenda. What we have been dealing with, and it will be presented, of course, a little bit later, our specification. We have adopted a community approach for the development of the specification, where everything is being drafted entirely on GitHub. And we have done that through multiple iterations. So it's really something that is evolving gradually in time. A few words about also the good practice procedure that was mentioned. The idea of the good practice procedure in Inspire is to provide a fast track means for the development and endorsement of new technical approaches. So this is done within the remit of the existing legislation, but we want to have a community-driven approach where Inspire stakeholders propose a good practice with a certain technology, with a certain standard, and it is very important that those who propose also come up with implementation evidence. So we really want to keep this real and to really have already the proof that it works in practice. So there is a 5-step procedure for endorsement of those good practices, starting from filling in of an initiation fiche, then submission of a good practice candidate, outreach. This workshop today is our outreach activity. Once we have all the implementation evidence, this good practice is submitted to the Inspire MIG. Further feedback is collected, and then hopefully the good practice becomes endorsed. It's important also to highlight the fact that we already have quite a lot of technical guidelines available in Inspire, and those good practices, and in particular the good practices, the good practice on the OGC API features does not substitute any of those, but it is more of an alternative approach that data providers may decide to take on board. The good practices are non-binding, so they only give us one of many possible ways of implementing and meeting the legal obligation. After having now done this brief overview, I think it is time to move on to the next part of our in our agenda, which would be the overview of the OGC API features standard. So that would be delivered by Clemens Portele, Interactive Instruments, but also a co-editor of the standard itself. So please, Clemens, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So I will give a very brief introduction of what OGC API Features is about for those that aren't that familiar with the developments, basically the OGC web services that we all know and that you have seen on the previous slide, that are the basis of many of the technical guidelines, have been with us for 20 years. They are basically 20-year-old technology, and modernization is overdue, or has been overdue for quite a while. And that is basically what the OGC API standards are about. And I just put a quote here from a webinar of that George Percival and Scott Simmons gave in May this year, and basically highlighting the new developments that are coming, and pointing out that if you're using OGC web services, there's no need to change now, but you really should be looking into OGC APIs and how to potentially upgrade in the future. And the activity that we see in Inspire is basically that kind of activity. Next slide. So basically, what OGC API features, it actually started as WFS, Web Feature Service version 3.0, but then the whole activity got more momentum, more traction, and is extending to other resources beyond features. So there is this new family of standards that's coming from OGC, the OGC APIs. And basically, let me explain a little bit what I mean when I say modernization. It's really one of the things is that the OGC web services don't really meet the expectations of developers today. They are the style, the architectural style that is used, the use of this dependency on XML, that is not what people today expect, or many expect. So basically, there are several things that we did in this revision. So OGC API features support similar functional capabilities as WFS, but it has a fresh look to it. So first of all, we're trying to get rid of everything that is OGC specific, unless there is a need to have it OGC specific. So there are no more, the classic capabilities are gone. We're using Open API, the basic technology used to describe web APIs or HTTP APIs. We're using HTTP as it is designed, and not like in the OGC web services, which basically used HTTP as a tunnel, like the old SOAP web services from that time did. And as a result, all what we do is much easier to learn and use. It's much faster to implement and also deploy. We got rid of the dependency to XML. We actually have no strict dependency to any encoding to be able to go with whatever is the flavor of the day. Currently, that's for HTTP or web APIs, that's JSON. So that's what we focus on. And I think in all the deployments that you will see today, they're all using JSON for machine-to-machine communication, and also leveraging GeoJSON as the format for features, which has very wide support in libraries and tools. And part of that is then also to simplify access to our data for those that are not experts, right? So the geo experts, they may have the time and energy to actually work with the tools, work with the more complex things, but lowering the barrier is important. Alex also mentioned the use of the web browser, and one of the things that we also do is we say HTML and the web browser that's part of the web. That's important. So you don't really need to actually look at a data set. You don't need to install your GIS client first. You can use any web browser and look at the data. That's a big advantage, and then also it opens up things to search engines, etc. And another big change is actually the way OGC is developing the standards. Most of the time, there was a standard that was developed first in the committee, and afterwards it was implemented. We turned that around and said we'll do implementations first, and then document in the standard what is proven to work. So that's the general strategy, and so that's why it also takes somewhat longer often, because we want to experiment for 2 years or so with multiple implementations to get the feedback and be sure that it works. So we only want to standardize things when things are already used in practice. And also, everything is not behind closed doors. Everything is done in a public GitHub repository. There are GitHub channels, etc. So it's an open and inclusive process that's being used. Next slide. And another aspect is that if you look at Web Feature Service as a standard, it is a big standard with many capabilities, and for those who just want a tiny certain aspect, or let's say the minimal thing, it's really hard to understand which are the minimal things. So we break it down into multi-part standard. Every part covers only a specific capability. So you only need to understand the stuff, and it's easy to identify and then understand and implement the parts that you really need for your use cases, both on the server and on the client side. And it also follows the OGC standard model for standards. So every part specifies one or more requirements class, and you can only claim conformance if you implement everything from a requirements class. There is no such thing as options, etc. So it's also much easier to identify the capabilities that a certain API or product uses, because it is basically a short checklist. I support this, that, and but not this requirements class. So that makes it easier, and that's also one of the aspects that has been used here in the Inspire activity. Next slide. To give you an overview of the different parts. Alex, could you switch to the next slide? Okay, thank you. To give you an overview of the existing parts. So part one, that is the only thing that is used right now in the good practice. That is the core, basically the capabilities that almost all implementations that want to share features over the web will need. So that's significantly less than, let's say, what WFS 2.0 had, but it's also then much easier to implement. And the work started actually in late 2017 and was published, approved and published in last year in October. And since this year, since a few weeks, it is also an ISO standard. There are OGC compliance tests that exist. So if you have an implementation, you can test, or if you have an API, you can test it. And there are certified implementations available. I think the slides will be shared, so then you can click on the links and get to the pages that have more information on that. Then there is a second part, which is, I think, also relevant for Europe, because part one focused only on WGS 84 as a coordinate reference system, and part two supports additional coordinate reference systems by reference. So that means that we only use identifiers, so basically the EPSG or OGC CRSs that are most commonly used. So that is really needed in Inspire to support coordinate reference systems. That work started a bit after the core, but it was actually approved and published this week. So that's the second part, the second OGC API standard that has been approved and published by OGC. And the compliance tests for this one are under development. It's a very simple one. It basically just gives you the ability to request the geometries in another coordinate reference system. So that's what I meant with modular specification, focusing on specific capabilities. Then there are two more that are quite advanced and with multiple implementations. The third one gives you more advanced filtering capabilities, and that will be needed, is also relevant for Inspire. That will be needed if to meet the requirements of direct access download services, the requirements in the regulation. That's in draft status. There are multiple implementations of this. I think about 5, 6 implementations that we have on the server side, and it's pretty much mature. We're wrapping up the work to get it ready for public comment. Public comment is a strange term because it's been public all the time. So, and you can provide comments now, but it's basically the last call for comments before it would move to becoming a standard. And we hope there's a little bit of process about that, but probably we'll see that early next year, the public comment, and then we should target publication around mid next year. And the fourth part is about simple transactions. Not sure if the name will stick, but it's basically just create, update, delete features operations. In that sense, it's less relevant for Inspire itself. And there we are also not there yet. I would say we need more implementations, but it's been coming. There have been sprints on that topic to get also more implementations. And there, I think it will be somewhat later, probably something around late next year when this will be a standard. And we're right now, there are lots of additional capabilities that have been requested several times and that are under discussion in the GitHub repository. So we'll work on additional capabilities as we see needs or demand in the market and where we have enough requirements for more than one community or use case. So that's about the introduction, and I think Heidi, you will continue with an overview of the Inspire specification.
Yes, I will.
Please, Heidi. Heidi Van Parijs from the Danish Agency for Data Supply and Efficiency, one of the main engines behind the specification in Inspire. So please, Heidi, the floor is yours.
Yes, if you please move to the next slide with the principles. Thank you. Yes, so I would like to start with highlighting some of the main principles. So on the one side, there are some principles from the OGC API feature spec. That is that one web API provides data from one data set. And that data set is then structured into one or more feature collections. And all those feature collections that are available under the collections path are considered to be a part of the data set provided by that web API. And one of the reasons that we would like to highlight here is that with a web feature service, what you sometimes will see is that you have one web feature service that gives access to a lot of data sets. And that cannot necessarily be done here. So you should be aware of that. Then on the other side, some principles that we have been using or that have guided us during the work with this specification is that we were very aware of the fact that we did not want Inspire specific extensions. That was the case with web feature service, and that has given some troubles. So that has been one of the guiding principles. Then one other important principle is that, as always, that the composition of a data set is determined by the data publisher. It's a decision of the data publisher what a data set is and what features it contains. A consequence of that is that, of course, it is possible that the data set contains features that belong to different Inspire spatial data teams. And a third principle from Inspire is that because, of course, we have to be compliant to the legal obligations, is that we found it necessary to have this principle that a feature collection contains features of only one feature type. And then a guiding principle for both specifications is already highlighted by Alex and Clemens, is that we wanted to have confirmed support by tools, both client and server side, before moving the spec forwards and having it approved. Next slide, please. Yes, as you could already see on a previous slide from Alex, there are 4 requirements classes shown at the bottom within Inspire. What I would like to highlight here is that the Inspire core requirements class not only builds on the core requirements class from OGC API Features, but also on Open API 3.0. So it is a requirement to use Open API 3.0 within this Inspire specification. And then on the next slides, I will go quickly through the different requirements classes. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So there is one mandatory requirements class. Alex, I see a gray screen right now. Thank you. So there is one mandatory requirements class within Inspire. Four main things here. The first one I already mentioned, that is that a feature collection contains features of only one feature type. Second thing important to know is that the link to the metadata records is required. And in most cases, that metadata record will already be available in the national portal because that had to be done already a while ago, having those metadata available. A third requirement is that there must be a link to the license of the dataset, because that piece of metadata is really, really important for end users to know what can I actually use this data for? Can I actually use it when I get it from this API? A fourth requirement is that there must be a link to the Inspire feature concept dictionary, so you can say what features do we use? Is this an address? Is it about buildings? Is it about something else? That's a relatively new requirement for those that have been looking at the spec early on, and that is to solve an issue that we had originally, another requirement placing because restrictions on the ID of the collection which is used in the URL. So it's basically to help relax that other requirement that we say, okay, then add a link to the Inspire feature concept dictionary. Next slide, please. There is a conditional requirements class on multilinguality. What we could see with the web feature service and also other technical guidelines was that quite some of the Inspire extensions to existing OGC standards that were needed was on this topic of multilinguality. So we really had a lot of thoughts on how could we use this. So it is conditional in the sense that you only have to use it when you actually have data sets that are provided in different languages. So apart from that, it uses standard mechanisms. So it uses a HTTP content negotiation, which has, amongst others, a concept called language negotiation. So what you have to do when you want to implement this requirements class is that you need to use the HTTP headers accept language and content language. Next slide, please. Yes, Alex, I see some gray on the screen, a gray rectangular. Yes, thank you. As Clemens already mentioned, it is strongly recommended to use JSON and GeoJSON for features. There is a recommendation in the specification that said that, okay, if you use GeoJSON encoding rule, please reuse the work that has been done earlier within the Inspire work program on alternative encoding. So there is a repository that has documentation on how you could do model transformations of the Inspire data model and conversion rules that explain, okay, how can you go from this UML model, this perhaps flattened UML model, to a GeoJSON encoding. So you should follow those or add to the repository if you have your own JSON encoding. Next slide, please. The last requirements class, it's an optional requirements class, is on bulk downloads, and it basically provides two options for linking to an external resource. Could, for instance, be a geopackaged file containing all the features in the dataset. So one option is that you have a link on the collections resource that links to a bulk download. Another option is that on each feature collection that the web API provides, you include a link to a bulk download of that feature collection. So if you had two feature collections, you would link to two different files containing the features in that collection. And that was it from my side on the requirements classes.
Many thanks, Heidi, for this concise overview of what we have done in terms of specification. Also, thanks, of course, to Clemens for providing the overview of the standard. I think that with these two short interventions, we have convinced you that the standard is mature, powerful, modern, and already provides so many opportunities to modernize and to share data in a really efficient manner. With the specification on Inspire in particular, we have tried to really lower the entry level for those who want to implement the standard. We have adopted the same modular approach, and really that having been said, I would encourage you all to investigate the specification and the standard itself, and to consider, if you haven't already done so, deploying and taking this on board. Okay, now that we know what the spec is all about, now that we have introduced the standards, let's go to the very interesting part of the session today, which deals with the different deployments. We're going to go to different countries and different application domains, as was already mentioned. We're going to hear about different technologies. As Clemens already mentioned, there are quite a lot of implementations already of the OGC API features. So let's do that, diving into the details. The first presentation will be delivered by Rupe Tervo from the Finnish Meteorological Institute. Please, Rupe, walk us through your deployment example.
Thank you. Finnish Meteorological Institute employment cover weather observations from Finland, which means approximately 400 weather stations. The data belongs to Inspire Team 13, atmospheric conditions and meteorological geographical features. And we have used we have encoded the data in the service using experimental observation measurement simple JSON encoding, which is technically GeoJSON, but there's a time series in the property list. The current implementation, the current server which is providing the API is a proxy server which fetch the data from FMI operational data server SmartMet and provides the standard API. All software is open source, licensed with MIT license, and you can find links to the GitHub repositories from this slide. The main implementation issue at the moment is how to extract point time series from multidimensional data, like, for example, weather forecasts, because current feature service is not very intuitive in that kind of case, where features do not exist before they are requested, but features are kind of created on demand from the data cube behind it. It's something which should be discussed more still and resolved in a way or another to meet all goals of Inspire and especially new PSI directive. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to you, Rupe. As was mentioned already, we will share the presentation so that you will get a chance to go into to click through the different links and investigate the endpoints. There are the links to the different GitHub issues, so I would encourage you to do that. Thanks once again, Rupe. Now from Finland, we will move on and we will look into the example of a deployment done by the French Geological Survey and the Office for Biodiversity, and this will be presented by our colleague Sylvain Grelet. So Sylvain, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, Alex, I will just scan that slide, and then at some point you could you pass me the screen so that I could share what's on the GitHub maybe?
Yes,
sure. Is that okay with you?
Yep.
Okay, I forgot to say hello everyone. We've implemented OGC API feature on top of our pre-existing, say, Inspire OGC compliance system. So on two use cases, one is surface water and the other one is groundwater. The first one, surface water, is mainly focused about hydrometry monitoring, river gauge kind of stuff. So we have features from the Inspire EF theme, the hydro theme, and all that is around observation and measurement. And we try for both use cases and other work to put URIs between all those feature instances and also two APIs. For groundwater, we have monitoring facilities monitoring groundwater quantity properties. We have hydrogeological units, bunch of observation. The configuration is OGC API features. This is not today's topic, but observation are served using OGC Sensor Things API, and depending on the encoding, given that we are exposing to JSON, GML, and JSON LD for some, we've tested properly to consume the flow in various clients like QGIS. Also web clients, Genesis is the one developed for Sensor Things API, I believe, in the Biordinary viewers following data. So far we're using for that specific OGC API features topic is the Jira server. Try as much as possible to contribute to the evolution of the tool. So we will run with 2.17.2 version back with PostGIS and a bunch of modules and extensions. That's OGC API, traditional app schema, and really recent but useful and really cool feature templating community extension that allows to actually kind of really wake what you see is what you get, JSON LD into a JSON configuration, and some of your JSON heuristics that are in the core. We're migrating to production environment, and I have much more detail on this page. So Alex, can you just pass me the presentation? I guess I can right now. Yeah, okay. Can you guys confirm you see my screen?
It is still loading. Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, perfect. So this is the reading markdown from a project called contributing to a European project called API for Inspire. I heard about that one, and I just tried to update content. It's only take on the slide. So we have the hydro features API endpoint. What is interesting in it is that each feature instance is assigned a URI. So you can either access it directly through its own URI, or actually the request corresponding request in the API feature corresponding to what ID precise collection feature type. Interesting fact of the having URI to everyone, you can traverse from one feature instance to the other without searching back to the API. Of course, you can have your information result from this query to the API. I gave a nice running example because you can publicly access it. So one hydro station on the Rhine, and the idea is that from one station you can do the water coursing sequence according to historic terms, and then the water course it belongs to, and then traverse through all the geographic details of that specific river stretch, or also directly traverse to stations. So the project I was willing to share with you is this one. I set up the Rhine, and ask me where, and if we zoom in that specific part, we have this running on. So our hydro station, it's a bunch of URIs that basically just OGC API request in the backend. So if you traverse in the content, you will be able to point to the feature of interest or to what coursing sequence it is interested in, and then progressively you can traverse through the entire French representation of the Rhine River. So I gave a lot of linked collections. So you can access that very specific hydro station, use GeoJSON, using LDTML. This is served by your server, and this one is directed to the sensor in the API request. And I will give more also, I have access points to the groundwater one, but the API endpoint is not open, only directly through URI. And yeah, it's not a sexy demo in whatever client, but I mean, all data is in here, and this is a representation of our hydro station according to inspired terminology. And if you want to have, I don't know, like the water course, it's monitoring, and I'm doing like rural content negotiation, then you have it. And it's so, I mean, if you paste it in your JSON playground, this is the real stretch I'm speaking about. So just good development just to allow people to do something on linkhref kind of, I don't know, linkhref HTML or into that hyperlink, and then you add features to your map context or observation. I guess that's all. You can answer questions if you want.
Many thanks, Sylvain, for that presentation, and congrats for the live demo, which worked smoothly. If you have any questions for Sylvain or for any of the other presenters, please either use the chat or raise your hand and discuss those in the questions and answers session. So now, with that being said, let's move to the next deployment example. We go to Germany, to the Rhineland-Pfalz or Rhineland-Palatinate German Länder. And we have Armin Retracht, who will walk us through the example of what is done there. So Armin, please, the floor is yours.
Alexander, I have a question. Do you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Headset, okay. And I'm Armin from Rhineland-Palatinate. I'm the architect of the central geoportal solution of 3 different German states, and our geoportals are really old. They are from 2005 from the concept, and they are based on OWS service registries. And in this case, we have many different WFS services registered since many years. And our solution is also based, as some before, on a proxy variant. And the WFS interfaces, which are registered in our PostGIS database, are used as a starting point and are proxied via a simple, very simple PHP script, which fulfills these OGC API demands. The APIs are also integrated in service metadata records since 1 year, and we publish those service metadata records in the SDI Germany via CSW interface, and they are also published via the CCAN API in our central open data portal, and so therefore it can go through the German open data portal till the European open data portal. We implement the core HTML, GeoJSON, OpenAPI, and GML interfaces, and tested it maybe two weeks ago with QGIS 3.14.10 client successfully. And we also implemented simple HTTP authentication to serve also access restricted feature types or collections. We go a little bit further and use JSON schema attributes in the WFS to make a simple mapping of the attribute names into man-readable names. And in the future, we want to use JSON LD context documents to make a semantic mapping for the persistence URIs to the objects. The landing page for all classified, open data classified WFS interfaces, we have one landing page with a really simple URI, and we have actually more than 70 WFS services which are published and open data classified in our SDI, and maybe I show you the examples after this. The status interfaces are productive since November 2019, and it's based on very old OSGeo software, under MIT licenses Mapbender 2.8, and in the future we are migrating to our new service registry, also open source based Mr. Map. It's at the OSGeo.org Git if someone want to see it and test it. And we want to change the actual PHP script for the proxy via the PyGeo API solutions. It's really simple, I think, to integrate it in Mr. Map, because Mr. Map is based on Django. Okay, and now I try to make a live demonstration and try to share my screen. That's okay?
Yes, Armin, please do so.
Okay. Come on. Application. Yeah. Okay, and now do you see the screen?
Still loading.
Still loading, okay. Still loading?
Maybe yes. What you need to do is stop sharing, and when
Stop
you
sharing,
decide
yeah.
to share, to choose which of the different products that you have
Maybe I
running,
try the screen all
or the whole screen.
because the okay, meeting focus. Whole screen. Okay, now you see my whole screen.
No, it's the same, unfortunately.
No, only white.
Only black, actually, or dark gray.
Maybe I switch to the, wait a moment, to another implementation.
Armin, if you want, I can try to share my web browser if that would be fine.
Now in Chrome and connect it on other screen and try to share it on Chrome.
Please.
Okay, screen. Yeah. Okay, so screen. Okay, do you see it?
No, it's the same, unfortunately. We
don't see anything. Okay, maybe you, okay, Alexander, you share your screen.
Okay, just give me 1 second. Can you see the screen now?
Yes, I see it.
Excellent. So tell me what to do, please, Armin.
Yes, okay. You may search in Google or Kiosia for Geoportal RLP. Or maybe you click on the link in the presentation. Okay, this is the right side. Okay, understand. And now you may give a search and search for Trier. Yeah, okay. And use datasets.
Okay.
Hello? Can you hear me, colleagues? I think we lost Armin.
Yes, we
I can hear you.
Yes, so no, unfortunately, I see him connected, but there is no audio. So no, I think in the interest of time, we need to move on.
Hello?
Okay, yes, you're
I'm
back.
back again.
Hello.
Okay, thank you. You see the organizations, Stadt Trier, the first entry in the organization facet on the left side. Below, yes, Stadt Trier, okay. And now the data sets. And we have many, many data sets. If you go, yeah, right, a little bit down. And yes, maybe you can use Planungsbereiche and download 4 results. Okay, and so now you see the integration in our OGC API Features draft. And if you click on the right side symbol for download the data, yes, it will open in a new tab. And then you have the interface, the OGC API Features interface opened directly. Okay, maybe you can shorten the URL to spatial objects to see the list of all open data classified WFS. And maybe you can put some of it, maybe you get a little bit down to the bottom of the site. We have many WFS. And you may, okay, a little bit up. And you need metadata, Metadatenbebauungspläne, RP, okay? It's a WFS 2.00, and you choose the collection, E-plan Polygon. It's the collection, yes, and there. And then you see all municipality plans in Rhineland-Palatinate, and we have 10,000 of them. And now you see the attributes in the list, in the table below the map viewer. And these attributes are German named, and they came from, if you go a little bit back, you see JSON schema, an attribute which is called JSON schema, a schema, a little bit more, okay. You see it? Okay, and there is the link to the schema JSON file. If you click on the schema, you see the schema which is used by our proxy to build up the HTML interface. And then you can do a mapping, a simple mapping of the property names, of the technical property names of the WFS to the HTML representation. Maybe you can use multilingual properties also. This is a type of way. Okay, so there's some example. If you want to test them, you can click on the slides afterwards and think this is the most thing I want to show. Maybe you can go to the open data portal in Germany. This is Gov data. If you search for Gov data.
Armin, sorry, but I think we need to move on now. I think if you
Okay,
have the link, I would propose that colleagues look into it afterwards, and then we move on because we're running out of time now.
Of time, yes, okay.
Thanks a lot for your representation. I think a good teamwork. We have managed to go through everything and do the demo. In your example, I find particularly interesting the fact that this development is implemented on the regional level. So in a way, you're with one shot with one activity modernizing quite a lot of already existing legacy systems, and then all the providers, but even more so the users, get this modern functionality out of the box. So thanks a lot for presenting that.
Thank you.
Now, going to the, I will share again very quickly the slides, and then we will go to our next presenter, who will be Jari Reni from the National Land Survey of Finland. Jari has been deeply involved in writing the specification from the very beginning, and also has the implementation that he will present to us today. So Jari, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alex. NLS Finland has been implementing OGC API features, I would say, from the early beginning, and also attended several OGC hackathons. We have developed our own server, which is based on Java, and we take a content from PostGIS database, and then of course we have some configuration files to add new services. Our licensing is not defined yet for our product, so we are still in progress in productization. So we will see. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be open source. As Clemens mentioned during his introduction, this OGC API features is a multi-part standard, and our services support, of course, part 1, the core. We're also implementing part 2, coordinate reference systems by reference, and we are under the development of part 3 with filtering and CQL, common query language, so that's work in progress. So what we've exposed through this OGC API features, I have 4 examples here, from which 2 first ones are in production, geographic names and buildings, and those both are requiring authentication key. So when this presentation will be available in GitHub, you can click on that link and you will go to English page of registration, which is really a simple process. You just type in your email address and you will get a response where you have your authentication key. Then we have these 2 more like experimental services, Inspire addresses and Inspire buildings, which both are open, so there is no need for authentication, and we've tried to follow the encoding rules for GeoJSON in Inspire in these examples, but these are still very experimental, and maybe we don't know how long those will be available and when we probably put those in production, but of course that will be circulated to you when those will be available. All services are supporting or encoding is GeoJSON, but also geographic names can share GML 3.2.1. And I think this concludes my presentation. More information in the GitHub page for these services. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Jari. We look forward to hearing from you about the decision on the licensing of the tool. And then we move on to the next presentation, which will again be done by our colleague Clemens Portele. We go from Rhineland-Palatinate, we go further north to North Rhine-Westphalia, and Clemens will present us quite a few examples of the deployments in North Rhine-Westphalia. So please, Clemens, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you and hello again. So North Rhine-Westphalia has been working with OGC API feature deployments, experimental ones since late 2017, and is now moving APIs into production, including also currently 21 Inspire data sets. Inspire APIs consistent also with the interoperability requirements. We're testing everything with clients, QGIS, JavaScript APIs, the OGC compliance tests, and the APIs all support the requirements that are in the good practice, but also we support CRS, CQL, and several others, also JSON schemas and many other extensions that are not yet standardized, but we also support vector tiles and map styles, so you can also browse the maps directly. The software is using, under the hood, LD Proxy. That's an OGC reference implementation, also an open source one. And let me quickly just share my screen. Can I share it? Yeah, I think I can. So let me show you. So that's basically the catalog of all the APIs. It's also some non-Inspire APIs are on there. Let me, since it's Inspire, let me pick environmental API. So that's about low emission zones and for clean air management. It basically has the features, both the zones, but also let's say the specific roads that you cannot drive through. We also have persistent URIs that are not dependent on the API, but when you click them, you are actually redirected to the API. So that's the HTML version, but let me quickly show you the JSON, and then you will recognize basically the Inspire, the legal basis, the related party, the different attributes that are there. Just for the HTML, we convert it to German readable, human readable titles. And as I mentioned, we also do with all the data, you can also browse it as maps. So in that sense, it is also kind of a view service, although it doesn't meet the requirements because it doesn't give PNG. This is using vector tiles. Let me just go back and show you another one from agricultural policy. So that's basically the reference parcel from the IACS. And when we go to quickly to the data, this is mapped to land use objects. We can also see it's actually, let me go through to the last page. OGC API Features supports paging, so that's 733,000 features are in there in this API. And again, what we can do is we have the persistent URIs, you can link to those. We also created links that don't really exist. Basically, we can also go to the agricultural area feature. That's a separate API. And we also support extensions to the Inspire code lists because that is needed for to support the agricultural code lists, and we also host those on as a separate API to meet the requirements. So again, also here we have the support to maps, so you can, even if it's 700,000 features, you can already use it directly. That's what I meant earlier. You don't really need another client to actually get an idea of what the data set is about and whether you want to use it. So yeah, that's all that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Clemens. I think this is really impressive and very interesting work. Also covering the different domains was very useful. Okay, then we have one more example from ISPRA, from the Italian Institute for Environmental Research and Environmental Protection and Research. Carlo Cipolloni, our colleague, kindly provided that, but also he mentioned that he will not be. He has a meeting with his hierarchy. So I don't know. Is there someone else from ISPRA Ambiente who would like to present that? Doesn't seem to be the case, but in any case, anyhow, you will get the slides. There is a link to the endpoint that ISPRA Ambiente has tested. They're using GeoPackage and Postgres as the storage of the data for different application domains. So please take a look afterwards. Right. So this concludes the section about the deployments. I don't know whether you noticed, but actually none of the presentations that we heard used the same technology, which I think is very good news, which for me at least is evidence that it is mature, well supported, and having many options is actually good news. Very few words before we go to the discussion about the next steps. What we want to do with our subgroup, with our group, is to submit the good practice for endorsement by the Inspire Maintenance and Implementation Group. We are targeting the next meeting of the Inspire MIG, which is scheduled for the 26th and 27th of November. So literally around the corner. This is the first thing that we want to do, and we would like to get that good practice endorsed. The second step which we need to look into, and we are going to work on, is work with the colleagues here at the TRC and the community around the Inspire reference validator. The idea there is that we should come up with a conversion from the already existing abstract test suite, which we already have on GitHub, to executable tests, so that those who want to deploy the instances can also benefit from the validation procedures and really confirm that what they have done in terms of implementation is valid. Then we also would like to see an uptake of data providers. I'm happy that there are so many of you attending today. We had at a certain moment 150 plus participants. You are all kindly encouraged to really deploy that. We as a group did not do it for ourselves only, but the idea is that we contributed to the whole community, and it is very important that this is being used. Finally, yet importantly, this should be something that as a live document. We deliberately provided all the content on GitHub in order to benefit of the functionality for opening issues, for submitting pull requests. So we would like to keep it that way. We heard that the standard is very quickly evolving. At the same time, the more implementation evidence and deployment evidence we have, the more issues we will discover. But this is good. Let's keep it really alive. This is our objective, at least. That having been said, I would like to now open the floor for discussion. So if you want, you can either write your questions in the chat or raise your hand and then we give you the floor. So please, the floor is open.
Hi, Alex. This is Kobe Hobana from the OGC. Just wanted to say, we're very excited about OGC API features, being implemented within the Inspire community. And, would be happy to, we welcome feedback as well. We have a number of OGC API standards, some of which are under development, and if there are any capabilities that the community would like included into future extensions of the standards or emerging standards, we'd be happy to hear to hear from the community about those enhancements. But yeah, just a note to say, we're very happy about this uptake.
Thanks, Gobe. We are also happy. Of course, this is really a milestone from my point of view, and it's a really good opportunity to modernize the way in which we are sharing under Inspire. We are heavily relying, as always, on the OGC and are grateful for all the good work done there. You colleagues heard Gobe, so please get in touch. We are in this boat in a way together. So yeah, there's also, as was mentioned already, also the processes at the OGC are really modern, transparent, and are kept really pragmatic, which is, I think, a good news for all of us. Okay, are there any questions? So please, again, use the chat. Or raise your hand. I see one question here from Sylvain. I don't know, Sylvain, would you like to speak or would you prefer to keep it to the chat? It is already responded, actually. Please go ahead.
No, I mean, that can be really quick. It just after the actual data exposition using GeoJSON and what Helmin did in adding an extra reference to the schema or whatever documentation to allow developers and whatever to understand your GeoJSON structure, that might be interesting. I would write an issue in the spec. I mean, that there is not any reference in GeoJSON to any schema, so that could be added to like a property or whatever. Interesting stuff, I think.
Thanks a lot, Sylvain, and thanks also to Armin for responding there in the chat. I see two more questions. The first one from our colleague Martin Tuchinia from Slovakia, who is asking whether the OGC API features implementations will be supported by the European Inspire geoportal, where we have the functionality for download. I think we will indeed investigate how to best do that. But first things first, we need to have the good practice endorsed. Now, from a geoportal point of view, is a very busy period because now there is the reporting cycle and the deadline in the end of the year. So I think we will definitely, Martin, investigate that topic and come up with a proposal. We will get back to you. But I think, frankly, that this is something that we should do, provided that the geoportal already supports functionality for downloading data from the more, let's say, classical kind of download services like the WFS Atom and so on. Okay, then I see a question also from Emilio Lopez from Spain, who is asking, it would be fantastic to have a manual or a guide about how to create OGC API features by using GeoServer and of course and other solutions. You're right, Emilio. I think we don't really in our little subgroup of 15 representatives have the bandwidth to be doing that, but I think this would be up to the different software projects to do. What I know is that there is some development that is already being covered by one of our JRC projects, the API for Inspire projects for GeoServer, and I think that there is some documentation that is being made available within that project. But indeed, I think this would be more for each of the projects to do. And let me see whether there are. I hope this answers your question. See, Paul van Genuchten, what could be an interesting demo edit is how OGC API features can be consumed in a client like QGIS. Totally, that would be very, very interesting indeed. Client support is, I think, of fundamental importance because whatever noble initiative we undertake for sharing our data, if we don't make sure that this is supported by clients, it's in a way a dead end. And of course, QGIS is playing the most prominent role there, because one of the most important roles because of its wide uptake. We had a discussion in our group about QGIS clients. If I recall correctly, Clemens, you were mentioning about QGIS clients. Maybe can you say a few words on that one?
Well, it's actually, so the QGIS client, it basically uses GDAL. GDAL also supports OGC API features, part one. So basically, it's like adding a WFS in QGIS. It's actually the same module. So if you know how to add a WFS in QGIS, you can actually, I think it's with version 3.12 or 3.14, take one of the latest versions, and I think Armin also mentioned 3.14. You can simply add it just like any WFS, and it also uses the paging and progressively loads the data from the data source.
Thanks for that clarification, Clemens. And of course, this is not a plugin. This is core functionality of QGIS. So whoever has QGIS installed would get that functionality. And then there is another question, and I think we stop there from Chris Schubert about the Open Data Directive and high-value data sets. Dynamic data is also part of the public PSI directive. We could also have a good practice on that. You're right, Chris. Several, of course, we already saw some examples from our deployments that deal with dynamic data, in particular, the one kindly presented by Rupe from the Finnish Meteorological Institute, but also the one of Sylvain Grelet. Sylvain's one also orchestrates OGC API features server instance with the Sensor Things API server instance. There's some guideline also that is being investigated for Sensor Things API under Inspire, but also, as was proven today, it is possible to expose the spatiotemporal data with an OGC API features instance. That having been said, I think we are out of time. I would like to, in closing this discussion, to first of all thank all the participants in our subgroup for the outstanding work. I think this is very much appreciated, and there will be, I'm sure, a solid uptake of everything that is being done. So please continue that excellent work. For all the others, you're encouraged to follow us on GitHub. You see on the slide our repository. And then stay tuned. We will hopefully have the good practice endorsed soon, and then we can all use it and continue on validation and continue on in our shared activity on modernizing the way which we are sharing spatial and spatiotemporal data. Adding value to our technological stack and in general doing interesting cutting edge modern things with our data. That said, I thank you all for attending, and I wish you a very nice day and a very nice weekend.